The wind screamed through the chosen reservoir, a knife of cold slicing across the Korean hills. January 1951. Amos Kane, 63, pressed his back against the jagged wall of a mountain cave, his breath clouding in the dim light. His wiry frame ached from the damp chill seeping through his worn parka, patched from his days as a World War II motor pool mechanic. The cave, barely wide enough for the 5 men huddled within, smelled of wet stone and fierce sweat. Amos's gnarled hands, rough as the granite around him, clutched a rusted wrench, his only weapon, scavenged from a wrecked jeep. To the 4 young Marines around him, he was just an old volunteer, a civilian tag-along who'd overstayed his usefulness. But Amos knew machines, terrain, and survival in ways their youthful bravado couldn't match. The cave's mouth, half blocked by a slab of frost-cracked rock, framed a world of snow and shadow. Beyond, the crunch of boots on fresh powder sent a jolt through Amos's spine. Chinese People's Volunteer Army patrols were close, too close. Their voices, sharp and guttural, carried on the wind, mingling with the faint clatter of rifle slings. Amos's sharp ears, honed from years listening for engine misfires, caught the rhythm. 3 men, maybe 4, no more than 50 yards away. The Marines, faces pale under grime, froze in the gloom. Amos's mind raced. They were trapped, outgunned, and running out of time. Private Jimmy Walsh, 19, crouched nearest the entrance, his M1 Garand trembling in his hands. "They're gonna find us," he hissed, his voice cracking like thin ice. His wide eyes darted to Amos, then away, dismissive. "What's the old man gonna do? Fix their tank to death?" Amos's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He'd heard worse in his life, back in 29, when he'd scavenged scrap to feed his family, or in 44, when young lieutenants scoffed at his grease-stained hands. He'd outlasted their doubts then, and he would now. His fingers traced the wrench's cold steel, grounding him. The cave's walls pressed in, the air thick with the tang of gun oil and the sour reek of unwashed bodies. The others, Sergeant Roy Carter, Corporal Eddie Lopez, and Private Tommy Bell, shifted uneasily, their breath shallow. Tommy, the youngest at 18, clutched a blood-soaked bandage on his thigh, his face gray with pain. "We stay put," Carter growled, his voice low but firm. At 25, he was the group's leader, though his bloodshot eyes betrayed exhaustion. No noise, no movement. They pass, we live. His gaze flicked to Amos, skeptical. "You got that, old-timer?" Amos nodded, his gray eyes steady. He'd volunteered for this war, leaving his Ohio garage to aid the motor pool, only to be swept into this retreat when the Chinese surged south. The Marines saw a stooped civilian, not the man who'd kept trucks running through Normandy's mud or navigated backroads by starlight when maps failed. His age was his camouflage, but it was also his strength. Decades of fixing what others broke, of surviving when others faltered. The cave was a tomb of cold, its floor slick with frost that numbed Amos's knees through his threadbare trousers. The walls, jagged and unyielding, scraped his elbows as he shifted to peer through a crack in the rock slab. Snow swirled outside, a white veil masking the enemy's approach, but the crunch of boots grew louder, deliberate. A shadow flickered, then another. Amos's heart thudded, each beat echoing the memory of his brother's cough during the Depression, when they'd shared a single blanket in a Cleveland shanty. He'd kept them alive then, scavenging coal and bartering for bread. He'd do it again now. Lopez, wiry and quick-tempered, whispered, "We should fight. Rush them before they find us." His hand gripped his carbine, knuckles white. "And die in 10 seconds. Carter snapped. "They've got numbers, maybe mortars. We're 5 guys with 3 clips between us." 4, Amos corrected softly, his voice steady despite the chill sinking into his bones. "Tommy's got a full clip in his pocket." Tommy, slumped against the wall, managed a weak nod. "He's right. Forgot I had it." Carter's eyes narrowed. "You counting bullets now, Kane? Stick to wrenches." Amos let the jab slide. He'd heard it before, mechanics weren't soldiers, old men weren't heroes. But he'd seen engines sputter and men falter, and he knew the difference between panic and precision. His mind churned, mapping the terrain outside, the narrow ravine, the snow-buried jeep tracks, the frozen stream he'd spotted before they dove into the cave. If they could reach that stream, they might slip away, or fight on better ground. The air grew heavier, the cave's damp walls seeming to close in as the enemy's voices sharpened. A faint metallic clink, a bayonet brushing rock, sent Walsh flinching. Amos's hand tightened on his wrench, his mind flashing to a night in '43, under a Normandy sky thick with stars, when he'd rigged a stalled half-track to roll again, saving a squad from ambush. He'd been underestimated then, too, but he'd delivered. Now, with Tommy's wound worsening, the boy's breath shallow and ragged, time was bleeding out. "We can't stay here," Amos said, his voice low but firm. "Tommy's leg, he's got hours, not days. Blood's soaking through. We move, or he's done." Carter's face hardened. "Move where? Into their rifles? You're no medic, Kane." "No," Amos admitted, "but I know machines and maps. That stream out there, it's frozen, runs south. We follow it, we're out of their patrol grid. I've seen it done." Lopez snorted. "You've seen it? What, in the last war?" "This ain't France, Pops." Amos's eyes flashed, but his voice stayed even. "It's terrain, son. Snow, mud, or sand, it's all the same when you know how to read it." He tapped his temple, where gray hair curled under his cap. "Depression taught me to find paths where none existed. War taught me to use them." Walsh shifted, his rifle clattering against the rock. The sound echoed, and outside, the enemy voices stopped. A long silence followed, broken only by the wind's wail. Then, boots crunched closer, deliberate, searching. Amos's pulse quickened. He caught Tommy's eye, the boy's face pale but trusting, and felt a flicker of resolve. These kids needed him, whether they knew it or not. The cave's chill sank deeper, numbing Amos's fingers as he scanned the group. Carter's jaw was set, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Lopez gripped his carbine like a lifeline, while Walsh's hands shook. Tommy, barely conscious, murmured something, a prayer, maybe, or a name. Amos's mind turned to a scratchy radio in his Ohio garage, 1942, playing White Christmas as he worked late, dreaming of his brother, lost at Anzio. That song, that ache, grounded him now. He wasn't fighting for glory, he was fighting for these boys, for the chance to get them home. The enemy was closer now, their shadows stretching across the snow beyond the cave's mouth. A faint scrape, a boot on stone, sent Amos's heart into his throat. He leaned toward Carter, whispering, "We've got minutes, maybe less. Tommy's fading. I've got an idea, a way to use their own gear against him, but you've got to trust me." Carter stared, his face a mix of exhaustion and skepticism. "You? What's an old gearhead gonna do?" Amos met his gaze, unflinching. "What I've always done, fix what's broken, find a way out." He pointed to the wrench in his hand. "Their trucks are out there, half-frozen. I can make one fail, draw 'em off. But we need to move." A low groan from Tommy cut through the tension. Blood pooled beneath his leg, dark against the frost. The enemy's boots stopped, voices murmuring just beyond the rock slab. Amos's plan was a spark in the dark, but it needed trust, and time was running out. What would you do in their place? Share your thoughts below. The cave's icy grip tightened around Amos Kane, his breath shallow in the stale, frost-laden air. The Chinese patrol's boots crunched outside, closer now, their voices a low murmur that set the four Marines on edge. Amos, 63, clutched his rusted wrench, his mind churning like the gears he'd mastered in World War II motor pools. The young soldiers, Sergeant Carter, Corporal Lopez, Private Walsh, and the wounded Private Bell, watched him with a mix of doubt and desperation. Tommy Bell's blood-soaked bandage glistened darkly, his gasps faint. Amos knew time was slipping away. His plan, born of decades fixing what others broke, was their only shot. Sabotage an enemy truck to draw the patrol off, then slip down the frozen stream to safety. But trust was as scarce as warmth in this Korean winter. 1951. Carter's eyes bored into Amos, his jaw tight. "You're betting our lives on a busted truck? That's your big idea, Kane." His voice was a low growl, barely audible over the wind howling through the chosen reservoir's hills. Snow swirled beyond the cave's mouth, masking the enemy but not their menace. Amos met Carter's stare, his gray eyes steady. "I've seen trucks choke in worse cold than this. There's our Soviet surplus, half-rusted. One bad fuel line, and they're stuck. I can make that happen. Draw 'em away." His voice, rough as gravel, carried the weight of years spent outsmarting machines and men. He'd rigged jeeps to roll through Normandy mud. He could rig a diversion now. Lopez, leaning against the damp cave wall, scoffed. "You're gonna sneak out there, past their rifles, with that?" He nodded at the wrench, its steel glinting faintly. "You're older than my pops, man. No offense." "None taken," Amos said, though his chest tightened. He'd faced that tone before, Depression foremen calling him too scrawny, Army brass calling him too old. Each time, he'd proven them wrong, piecing together solutions from scrap and grit. He glanced at Tommy, whose head lolled against the rock, eyes half closed. "Tommy's got maybe 2 hours. We don't move, he's gone. You want that on you." Walsh, clutching his M1 Garand, shifted nervously. "What if they spot you? We're dead." "Then you shoot," Amos said simply. "But I won't get spotted. I know how to move quiet, learned at hunting rabbits in 31, when a missed shot meant no dinner." The cave's chill numbed Amos's fingers, but his mind was sharp, mapping the terrain outside, the snow-buried jeep tracks, the ravine's curve, the frozen stream snaking south. He'd spotted a Chinese GAZ-51 truck earlier, its engine coughing in the cold, parked 100 yards off. If he could reach it, a sliced fuel line or a jammed choke would stall it, drawing the patrol to investigate. The group could then slip out, using the stream's banks for cover. It was risky, but staying put was death. Carter rubbed his stubbled chin, his breath clouding. "All right, say you pull this off. What's next?" "We just run." "Stream's frozen," Amos said. "Hard as concrete, but narrow. Follow it south. You hit a ridge. UN lines are 3 miles out. I've walked worse in worse weather." His mind flashed to 44, guiding a lost convoy through a French blizzard using only a compass and starlight. He'd been 56 then, too old for the draft, but he'd delivered. Now, at 63, he'd do it again. Lopez muttered, "Sounds like suicide. They've got dogs, maybe. Or mines." "No dogs," Amos said firmly. "Too cold, and I'd have heard him. Mines. They're not digging in this frost." His voice carried the calm of a man who'd weighed risks before. Starvation versus theft in the Depression, your town, Ohio winters, or dodging panzers in 44. He knew when to act. Tommy groaned, his voice a whisper. "Listen to him, Sarge. He knows stuff." His trust, frail as his pulse, cut through the tension. Amos crouched near the cave's mouth, peering through the rock slab's crack. The patrol's shadows moved in the snow, their rifles slung low, searching methodically. A faint clatter, a dropped canteen, sent Walsh flinching, his rifle scraping the wall. The noise echoed, and the enemy voices paused. Amos's heart pounded, but he held still, his mechanic's hands steady. He'd once rebuilt an engine by candlelight under shell fire. He could handle this. "Need a distraction," Amos whispered. "Something small to test him." He pointed to a loose stone near Walsh. "Toss it, low, toward the ravine. Not far." Walsh hesitated, his eyes wide. "That'll bring him closer." "Do it quiet," Amos said. "They'll think it's a fox or wind. Buy me time to get to that truck." Carter nodded reluctantly. "Do it, Walsh." Walsh tossed the stone, its thud muffled by snow. The patrol's voices sharpened, boots shifting, but they didn't charge. Amos exhaled, his plan taking shape. He'd need to crawl through the snow, using the ravine's edge for cover, to reach the truck. A 5-minute job, if he wasn't shot first. The cave's damp air clung to Amos's skin, the cold biting his joints as he outlined the plan. "I cut the fuel line, truck stalls, they go check it. We move fast, stream's our path. Tommy, you're carried. No arguments." He looked at Carter. "You in?" Carter's jaw worked, his skepticism warring with Tommy's fading breaths. "If you screw this up, Kane, we're done." "I don't screw up," Amos said, his voice steel. He thought of his wife, Clara, back in Ohio, her voice steady as she'd packed his bag for Korea. "You always find a way, Amos." That memory, warm as a hearth, steadied him now. He'd survived the Depression by scavenging, World War II by ingenuity. This was just another fix. Lopez, still doubtful, muttered, "Hope you're as good as you think, old man." Amos's lips twitched, a half-smile. "Better." He glanced at Tommy, whose eyes fluttered, clinging to hope. Amos's mind drifted to his garage, 51, where he'd fixed a neighbor's tractor while kids played stickball outside, their laughter echoing small-town grit. That was why he'd volunteered, to keep that world safe. Now, it fueled his resolve. A sudden shout outside snapped Amos back. The patrol was closer. 20 yards, maybe less. Their flashlight beams sliced through the snow, grazing the cave's mouth. Walsh stifled a gasp, and Carter's hand tightened on his rifle. Amos's plan hung by a thread, but he saw the path clear. Slip out, sabotage the truck, lead the group down the stream. He'd need to move now, before the patrol closed the gap. "Cover me," Amos whispered, slinging his wrench into his belt. "When you hear that engine sputter, get Tommy ready. We're gone in 10 minutes. Carter stared, then nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Don't die, Kane." Amos crawled toward the cave's edge, the frost stinging his palms. The truck's outline loomed in the snow, its exhaust a faint hum. He could do this, had to. For Tommy, for the boys, for the home he'd sworn to protect. The group's eyes followed him, doubt giving way to hope. They were ready to move, if he could deliver. What would you risk for those counting on you? Share your thoughts below. Amos Kane's palms stung as he crawled through the snow, the chosen reservoir's icy wind cutting through his parka. The Chinese patrol's flashlight beams danced dangerously close, their boots crunching 20 yards from the cave where the 4 Marines waited. At 63, Amos's body ached, but his mechanic's hands, steady from years in World War II motor pools, gripped the wrench tucked in his belt. The Soviet-made GAZ-51 truck loomed ahead, its engine idling weakly in the frost. Sabotage it, draw the patrol away, and lead the group down the frozen stream to UN lines. That was the plan. Tommy Bell's life, bleeding out in the cave, hung on Amos's success. Doubt lingered in the Marines' eyes, but Amos carried their hope, forged in Depression scrapyards and wartime grit, to prove wisdom could outshine youth. The snow muffled Amos's movements as he slid beneath the truck, its undercarriage crusted with ice. The air reeked of diesel and cordite, the cold biting his knuckles raw. His fingers, nimble despite their scars, found the fuel line, a brittle rubber hose, just as he'd expected from shoddy Soviet surplus. A quick slice with his wrench's edge, and fuel dripped into the snow, black as Tommy's blood in the cave. Amos's heart pounded, each second a gamble. He remembered 44, rigging a half-trax engine to backfire and scare off a German patrol. Same trick, different war. He jammed a rag into the choke, ensuring the engine would sputter and die, then slithered back toward the ravine, his breath shallow to avoid detection. A shout rang out. The patrol had heard the truck's first cough. Flashlights swung toward it, boots crunching as the soldiers moved to investigate. Amos reached the cave's edge, his gray eyes meeting Carter's through the rock slab's crack. "Now," he whispered. "Get Tommy ready." Carter nodded, his skepticism gone, replaced by a soldier's trust. Lopez and Walsh hoisted Tommy, whose groans were faint, his bandage soaked. The truck's engine hacked, then stalled, its silence a signal. The patrol's voices grew frantic, drawn to the vehicle. Amos's plan was working, for now. The group slipped from the cave, the frozen stream gleaming under a sliver of moonlight. Amos led, his boots testing the ice, each step deliberate. He'd navigated worse Ohio winters, 33, when he'd trekked frozen rivers to deliver salvaged coal to his neighbors. Now, with Tommy slung between Lopez and Walsh, Amos's mind mapped the terrain, 3 miles south to the ridge, then UN lines. The cold numbed his joints, but his resolve burned, fueled by Clara's words back home. "You always find a way." Lopez, panting under Tommy's weight, muttered, "This ice holds, right?" "It'll hold," Amos said, his voice steady. "Keep low, follow my steps." His eyes scanned for patrol stragglers, but the truck's failure had pulled them away. The stream's banks, steep and snow-dusted, offered cover, but the open ice was a risk. A distant shout echoed. The patrol, realizing the truck was sabotaged. Time was thin. Half a mile in, Walsh slipped, his rifle clattering. The sound cut the night, and a flashlight beam snapped toward them from the ravine's edge. "Down!" Amos hissed, dropping flat. The group froze, Tommy's shallow breaths the only sound. The beam passed, but footsteps followed, 2 soldiers breaking off to search. Amos's plan teetered. Escape was close, but a fight loomed. Amos's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the patrol with Tommy wounded. He scanned the stream's banks, spotting a cluster of rocks, cover for an ambush. "Carter," he whispered. "We take him here." "2 men, we've got surprise." His voice carried the calm of a man who'd faced worse odds, like dodging foreclosure in 31 by bartering his skills. Carter's eyes widened, but he nodded. "You sure, Kane?" "I've been sure since Normandy," Amos said, his wrench heavy in his hand. He directed Lopez and Walsh to hide Tommy behind the rocks, then gestured for Carter to follow. They crept up the bank, the snow masking their steps. The patrol's flashlights bobbed closer, their voices low but careless, unaware of the trap. Amos signaled Carter, who fired a single shot, dropping 1 soldier. Amos lunged, his wrench cracking the second man's rifle from his hands. Carter tackled him, pinning him silent. The scuffle was over in seconds, the patrol neutralized without alerting others. Amos's chest heaved, his shoulder throbbing from the effort, but he'd bought them time. The cost was clear. His body wasn't what it was in 44, and the pain was a reminder of his limits. The group pressed on, the stream's ice holding firm under their boots. Tommy's weight slowed them, but his faint murmurs, names of family, perhaps, kept them moving. Amos's mind drifted to his garage, where he'd fixed tractors for veterans, their stories of Chosen's frozen hell still fresh in 51. That duty, that small-town pride, drove him now. He wasn't just saving these boys. He was honoring those who hadn't made it home. At the ridge, a faint glow marked UN lines, salvation. But the distant hum of another truck warned Amos the main patrol wasn't far behind. "Faster," he urged, his voice hoarse. Lopez, now silent, carried Tommy with grim focus, his earlier doubts gone. Walsh's nervous glances had steadied, and Carter's nods carried respect. Amos had become their anchor, his age no longer a liability but a beacon. A final obstacle loomed, a narrow gap in the ridge, exposed to sniper fire. Amos paused, his breath clouding. "I'll go first," he said, unclipping his wedding band, Clara's gift, worn since 29, and pressing it into Carter's hand. "If I don't make it, get this to Ohio." The sacrifice stung, but it steadied him, a reminder of why he fought. Amos darted across the gap, snow crunching underfoot, expecting a shot that never came. The patrol was too far, distracted by their crippled truck. He waved the group through, each man crossing as his heart pounded. Tommy, barely conscious, was last, carried by Lopez and Walsh. At the ridge's crest, UN sentries spotted them, their shouts a lifeline. Medics rushed forward, taking Tommy, whose faint smile thanked Amos wordlessly. The group collapsed in the UN camp, safe but shaken. Carter returned Amos's ring, his grip firm. "You're no gearhead, Kane. You're a damn hero." Lopez and Walsh nodded, their silence louder than words. Amos, bruised and aching, felt the weight of their respect, a victory harder won than the escape itself. Sitting by a fire, Amos stared at the flames, his mind on Clara, on the boys he'd saved, on the lessons of a life spent fixing what was broken. He'd proven wisdom outlasted doubt, that an old man's grit could change history. The Marines would tell this story, how a mechanic turned volunteer outsmarted a patrol and led them through a frozen hell. For Amos, it was enough to know they'd live to tell it. What lessons from your life echo Amos's courage? Share your thoughts below.